I wanted to ask you, Richard, is it notable how young Mark Richardson was when he got involved in serious crime? He's only 19 when he gets that first conviction, and at that point he's believed to be, along with his father, Mark Richardson Sr., running a massive drug empire.
Yeah, it was, as you said, Nicola, his father was well established in that field, in that part of Scotland, and the son just followed the father. But the son has subsequently overtaken the father and become such a major figure.
So we go through a little bit of his background and bring him up to where he is now. Of course, he is behind bars at the moment, but no doubt he's still active and very well known on the Scottish drug scene. But go back to the beginning with him and maybe start with his father.
He started with his father, and it was quite low level, albeit it was within the confines of Edinburgh. But he very quickly decided that there was more to be done, more could be done, and began to explore the possibilities of making contacts in other parts of Scotland, particularly in Glasgow.
So he was born in Edinburgh and raised in Glasgow, is that right? Or was he raised in Edinburgh?
He was raised in Edinburgh, and he's been established in Edinburgh all his criminal life.
Okay.
But in the last number of years, he has spread his tentacles out to the West Coast.
And you see, I suppose that is exactly the point, that he's coming of age. He's only a teenager, and the father has established quite a structured business. So he's kind of like walking in to take over in a way that another young person in their teens would have to start off lower down the ladder, probably, handling the street drugs or holding guns or money, and work their way up. Whereas he kind of had a bit of a silver spoon when we're talking about this drugs world.
Yeah, it's his father, as I said, was well known, and obviously having the contacts already established, the reputation, the name, it was a lot easier for Richardson Jr. to climb the ladder than it would have been for somebody just starting off trying to make it themselves.
For sure. So in 2006 is the first significant sort of event in what'll be our timeline of Richardson's life and crimes. But he's living in a house with his father in Edinburgh, and that house is raided by the police, where they find quite an amount of product and cash.
Yeah, it was a series of coordinated raids following up from quite a lengthy undercover operation. And they went through the door and they got exactly what they thought they were going to be. There was a considerable amount of cocaine, heroin, and a large consignment of cash. And that was probably the first time that the public began to become aware
of who the Richardsons were, basically. Yeah. Now, 2006 in Ireland would have been, the peak of the Celtic Tiger economy before it came crashing down around us. But it was also a very high peak in cocaine use here because of the wealth in the country and all the rest of it. 2006 in Scotland, were you experiencing similar sort of rise in the use of cocaine? It's the drug to be involved in, certainly in this country at that point.
Yeah, it was a similar picture here. Obviously, from the 90s onwards, mainly heroin. And then obviously ecstasy, but more and more cocaine because of its availability and its pricing and the glamour and the kudos that it has for some reason became increasingly popular.
And I suppose what you're seeing with the Richardsons, with that little sort of window we get into what's happening with them at that time, the cash there is sterling and euro. there's cocaine and heroin and other drugs. So they don't care. They're going to deal anything that brings them in money.
You know yourself, Nicola, any product that makes these people money, they will invest in.
And I find that interesting because later, of course, he's realising that there's potential in crack cocaine, a highly addictive drug, which is in and around that same sort of, it makes me laugh sometimes when the dealers will look down their noses on one another. If somebody's dealing heroin, a cocaine dealer might look down their nose on them because, that's the drug that really destroys society and communities. But when it comes to the Richardsons, there is no snobbery around it. They'll just put out or handle anything at all. So he's jailed in 2007 after those raids. The father himself and a third man, Richard Bonner, and he's sentenced to 32 months for his role in that cocaine plot. I think the father gets 4.5 years. Interesting again, and something that follows them through their careers. The father, I think, claims that he's fallen into debt because he's been seriously ill and that he's no option but to get involved in drugs to sort of ease his cash problems. And then the son sort of blames the father for getting him involved. Later, the stories will change. But they seem to be okay about that, blaming one or the other, presumably trying to get as light a sentence as possible.
Yes, that was the plea of mitigation that was put forward, that it was circumstances out with their control that led him into this scenario.
So he gets a short enough sentence, really, and he's back out on the streets in his early 20s. He's got that conviction under his belt, but he's straight back at it, Richardson.
Yeah, within 3 years, back before the courts for a much bigger consignment, around £2 million worth of coke and heroin. And, as you said, interestingly, Nicola, crack cocaine.
Right. That way in 2009 is the crack cocaine?
Yeah.
Okay. And is he, so the police are obviously continuing to put Richardson under surveillance. They know he's become a very big player, very young in the drug market. Was there an actual scenario there that he was cooking the crack himself when he was caught?
Yeah, well, the story is that when the police carried out the raid, or went to carry out the raid, amazingly, the front door was unlocked and they just walked in and he was in the process of cooking up the crack and was so caught up in this chemical process that he literally didn't see or hear the officers walking into the room.
I mean, that's slightly unusual, isn't it? Firstly, for, crack cocaine to be cooked in a kitchen, but by the actual dealer. Richardson's quite high up, even though he's young, to be actually stirring a pot of boiling crack cocaine, isn't he?
Yeah, you wouldn't expect him in that position to be doing that. I mean, somebody said that it may have been because this is obviously early days of crack cocaine. There weren't the people available and he had to be hands-on. But when the seizure was made, it was estimated to be about £700,000 worth, which at the time was one of the biggest, if not the biggest, crack cocaine seizure in Scotland.
And is that, or had that at that point become a street drug that was problematic? Because, it's certainly, the amount of crack cocaine that's been used here now is quite frightening. You can actually just see people literally on the streets, when it would be the 80s or the 90s, when there was the crack crisis in the US, we used to see photographs of this and you thought it would never come to our shores. But 2009 feels very early for that.
Yeah, it was, I think it was, you could probably say this was the absolute genesis of crack cocaine around that time. Nowadays, obviously, it's a completely different story with its availability and use. but certainly at that time it was unusual.
Yes, and he's one of the first entrepreneurs into the market and is willing to cook it himself. As an aside, he's obviously, and we'll come on to, he gets a bigger sentence in relation to this, but he's somebody who seems to be operating on all levels of the drug industry. So he's cooking crack, he's dealing, he's obviously, at the top of his game because of his own father's activities for a long time. But is he making enemies as he goes along? Is he somebody who realizes that to survive in that world, you need to be feared?
Yeah, there are several individuals who have had major fallouts with Richardson. George Bagri is one. He was an individual, Edinburgh-based individual, who has had several clashes with Richardson and his acolytes. But I think what's important to stress here with Richardson, by this stage, he has spread his wings and he's made contacts over in the west of Scotland, and he's made contact with the Daniels.
Right. And they saw potential in him, obviously. He was going to be useful to them.
Very much so. He's becoming the main man in Edinburgh on the East Coast. At the time, the predominant player on the West Coast. And so they probably both saw business opportunities to expand their empires.
And is that what it is, a partnership, a business, that he's not coming in with them to act as an enforcer or anything like that? Is he an equal?
But I think by this stage it was a business project, because he became very friendly with Kevin Gerbil Carroll. They became very close. So he was the enforcer as such, and Richardson was the salesman.
Mm-hmm. But he's locked up at the same time at this, and he gets 10 years, I think, in prison after this 2009, crack kitchen arrest. So what happens to him when he goes into prison? Does he continue that business relationship? Because, of course, drug dealers can still do their business behind bars, as we know.
Yeah, from what we know, it carried on pretty much regardless because of his, at that time, the reputation and the influence that it had. And he had, obviously, the backing of the Daniels.
Okay. And, sorry, explain to me, how can he serve half of sentence in Scotland? Your system is slightly different to ours. Is it that he's released on licence after that?
Yes, yeah. This is it is a subject that continues to this day, is the early release of prisoners, and it is particularly now with overcrowding issues. But there's a lot of serious players getting out relatively early, much to the annoyance of obviously law enforcement and politicians.
No doubt. Is it across the board that it doesn't matter the individual or the crime, that you're still entitled to that sort of but it's not remission because you have to live on license, don't you, in the aftermath?
Yes, that's the thing. You're on license, you can get recalled, but it's the fact that these people are back in society. I mean, they can still run their business from behind bars, but obviously it's a lot easier if you're outside. You might be on license, you might be on a tag, but it's not as restrictive as being behind bars.
So on his release, which is probably around 2015 in that case, he's presumably back under surveillance again. The police in Scotland know this guy is a serious player. He has, become more and more serious, and he's made this sort of deadly alliance with the Daniel mob. Yes,
and he's straight away, the police realise he's not going to go away, he's not going to stop. And the inquiries eventually reveal that, as well as the Daniels, Richardson has now started making contact with the Gillespie brothers, who Barry and James, they're from Rutherglen in South Lanarkshire. They are, or were, extremely major players in the Scottish underworld. So he's made these contacts with the Daniels, and now he's made contacts with the Gillespies. And the Gillespies are that high up the criminal ladder that they can deal directly with the major cartels.
So each are bringing something to the table. The Daniel mob, Richardson, and the Gillespies, they all have some sort of a speciality. The Gillespies in that they have the contacts directly with the cartels. So you're cutting out the middleman, who up to that point was more than likely based around the southern Spain. Richardson has turf, territory, a reputation, and the Daniel grouping are very powerful as well. So you kind of have an alliance of the three mobs.
Yeah. It's particularly with the Gillespies. The Gillespies are top tier. Although the word is that they had a fallout. They were in Spain and they were in a bar one night and they had a fallout with another group, but they didn't think anything about it until the following day. They were told that the group they'd fallen out with were the Kinahans.
Right.
So they very, very quickly took the advice and left. And they ended up in Brazil, in a city called Fortaleza, north of the country, where they established very good links with the local drug gangs. But eventually, as drug gangs do, they had a fallout. And the word is that they were both killed by the drugs gang and their bodies destroyed and put into the Amazon River.
My goodness.
Now, there's no actual confirmation that Gillespies are dead, but nothing has been heard from them for 3 or 4 years.
And you're talking about, just to place us when this fallout with the Kinahans happens, you're talking about 2015, 2016? Yeah. So at that point, you have the Kinahan organisation had been hit, of course, by Operation Shovel, a multi-agency offensive against them in 2010. They had been swept up. The Spanish police had described them as an Irish mafia, and they had been placed in jail awaiting trial. But they got out on bail, and slowly but surely, all the charges against them were dropped because I don't know really why, but the Spanish system doesn't seem to be able really for a lot of this organised crime activity and behaviour. It was also Europol's very first sort of multi-agency offensive, which we see them all the time now, but it was their first one of them. So no doubt mistakes were made. But the Kinahans had got back onto the streets and back sort of in charge of the Porta Banús area by about 2012-13. And in actual fact, they'd become very empowered at that point because they had told everybody that they were going to beat the system. They were going to beat these charges, and they did. And it made them look even more powerful than they were. So coming upwards to 2014, 2015, the Kinahan grouping was somewhat imploding. There was some arguments within it. Obviously, Gary Hutch became a victim of that. He fell out with Daniel Kinahan and was shot dead. There was attempts on Daniel Kinahan's life. But ultimately, from a business point of view, around that time, Kinahan was forming what we now call the European super cartel. And he had his sights set on Dubai and taking control of the cocaine market in Europe with all these other groupings from the Netherlands, Italy, and the Balkans. So there was a lot of ambition in the air at that point. And you have this in Scotland, you have this sort of merging of three very powerful criminal operations. They go out to Spain, stupidly fall out with Daniel Kinahan, really, because he wasn't the guy to fall out with at that time. But it's also interesting because it's around that time that we start hearing rumours that the Kinahans and the Lyons groupings are working together and that they're associates. And, you know, Stephen Lyons seems to have formed some sort of a partnership with Kinahan in Spain.
this is where the dynamic changes quite dramatically. As I said earlier on, it was the Daniels who were in a ascendancy and in charge on the West Coast, but the subsequent alliance between the Lyons and the Kinahans changed the whole picture.
So where does that leave Mark Richardson, an ambitious guy who may have lost his partners, the Gillespies, to Brazil, and what really happens to them maybe happens sometime later? But what does he do, and where's he at this point?
Richardson keeps doing what he does best, and that's supplying and running Edinburgh. He has other irons in the fire, but at that time he's quite happy to leave the others to do what they're doing, and he'll continue in charge of Edinburgh. But obviously in 2018, that all changed, because once again the police operation, which had been ongoing ever since his release from prison, found a link to him, several others, and they became one of the biggest organised crime gangs in Scotland. And it was Richardson who was pretty much at the centre of this.
So then they become the target again for Scottish police, and sometimes being the biggest and the most famous isn't really the cleverest when you're talking about committing crimes. He's linked to some guns around 2018, and it's really intriguing. I think his DNA is found on a gun which is discovered in a boot of a car, which is discovered in a lockup, and this car has been specially adapted to carry guns.
Yeah, they had a number of different vehicles, and they actually employed specialists who would design and create these hidden passages for weapons, ammunition, and they could only be activated. They had like a key fob, the type of thing everyone has for their own car. You would use it to activate your alarm. But when the police seized one car, it didn't activate the alarm, but they pressed the key fob. It didn't activate the alarm. And what it did, though, was it activated a trapdoor, for want of a better expression. And within this trapdoor was a compartment where they recovered a Glock.
Now, was this all discovered by accident after this high-speed chase he was involved in? Because he was being followed, I think, or under surveillance by police, and he took off, didn't he, in a mini car and drove crazy down the streets. And was it when he was arrested at that stage that the police were led to the guns, or did they know about them anyway?
They had suspected that there were firearms, but they needed a bit of luck. They found this key fob when they arrested Richardson. It was in his pocket. The car that he had been driving, a Toyota Yaris, was checked over. Initially, nothing untoward. But when they pressed the key fob, lo and behold, they discovered the weapon. And then they went on to have another bit of luck, because as well as that, finding the weapon, Richardson's DNA was on that gun. He's dealing in weapons at this point, is he? Yes, yeah. As you know, it was a natural progression, and his criminal upbringing. So yeah, and it's major firearms. It's Glocks. It's Heckler and Koch. There's a lot of heavy duty weaponry. Okay. And is there some incident that there's an attack, a shooting attack on Ross Monaghan around that time as well? Yeah. Ross Monaghan, who'd only just been acquitted of shooting dead Kevin Carroll, a few weeks earlier. He was taking his...
So Carroll being the enforcer for the Daniel mob and Monaghan being on the Lions side of things?
Yes, yeah. Monaghan was very high up with the Lions. He was taking a young child to school when he was approached and shot several times. He survived that incident, but it's salient that it occurred within weeks of him walking out the High Court in Glasgow.
Mm-hmm. For sure, and we'll come back to Monaghan and his fate in a wee while. So Richardson Senior is back before the courts himself at this point, and he's jailed. He's caught with cocaine in a van again.
Yeah, but it's quite noticeable that by this stage, he is really, it's become quite nondescript. His offences, his son is so far up the ladder.
And what's he's just moving a bit. I mean, again, being caught with cocaine in the van you're driving is pretty low down the ladder.
Yes.
Where you'd expect somebody like him to be. And of course, he goes into court and he blames his son's criminal offences for driving him to this point where he has to get involved in drug dealing.
Yeah, it's the same story as years ago with them. It's catch-22. I was in a situation, I had to do this. This led me to do that. And obviously, it didn't hold any truck with the courts.
And do they get on, or are they close, the father and son?
Yeah, it's very close-knit family.
Right,
very
okay.
Close-knit family.
Okay. So around 2019, we're coming up, Richardson is moved. Is this senior or junior that's moved to from one prison to another? Because there's reports that he's running the prison, essentially.
Yeah, it's junior.
It's junior, yeah. So what happened in that case?
Well, such were his contacts outside and inside the prison and his reputation. Obviously, there were members of other criminal organisations that weren't aligned to his, and the authorities, as they do, keep a very close eye on these things. And before anything was allowed to happen, Richardson Jr. was moved, but I mean, it still didn't put a complete dampener on things.
And I suppose it's around that time or shortly afterwards that we get a little sort of a look into what some of the finer things in life that he likes, because he's made a lot of money over a long period of time flooding Scotland with drugs, but he has a number of pieces of art confiscated from him and a luxury watch. Yeah,
it's quite interesting because it's very easy just to surmise that these individuals are non-intelligent and don't have any interest outside of money or violence. But by all accounts, art is one of Richardson's interests, and this collection was apparently very, very impressive.
And he's a good eye as well, obviously, has he?
Sorry, Nicola?
He has a good eye for art.
Apparently so, yeah. But the other thing, obviously, art is a very good way of laundering your money. It's a good investment. We've seen it numerous times that if the net is closing in, objects like paintings and the such like can be used. So it may be it's a win-win situation for him. He likes his art, but also it's a good way of investing his money. For sure. So as the Civil Recovery Unit are sort of taking their pickings of his art collection, he's still behind bars, right? And he's running his operation, but his associates make what you could either describe as a rookie mistake, or they are making some sort of a statement when they use some fake cash to pay for some cocaine they have purchased from your Mr. Big, a guy called Ross Miami McGill. We've a Mr. Big here as well. But there's, this is going to cause a lot of bother. Yeah, well, if this is what has kicked off the ongoing gang war, which has been it began late March, and it centres on one of Richardson's close friends, a gentleman called Michael Heaps. Michael Heaps decides he is going to buy £500 worth of cocaine from Ross McGill, who, as we've said before, at that time was a very unknown figure. And because of this, Heaps and probably Richardson believed that they could rip him off and there wouldn't be any comeback. There wouldn't be any problem with doing this. So Heaps paid for the cocaine with fake notes. McGill, understandably, was furious, but instead of, as was expected, sitting back and not doing anything, McGill decided he would act, and he started this war, which is going on 6 months later. Firebombings, shootings, machete attacks. And it's astonishing that somebody who was so little known about 6 months ago is now such a major figure.
You talk about McGill?
Yeah.
Yeah. And is he totally independent, or is he aligned to any of the other gangs that we've spoken about, the Lions organisation, the Daniel organisation, the whatever's left of the Gillespie network?
Well, I think McGill paid a very, very savvy move. McGill obviously is in Dubai, realises that he needs support, backup, in order to carry out these attacks. But whether by hook or by crook, he approaches the Lions because he knows the Lions have links to the Kinahans, and that association has considerably weakened the Daniels. And he says to the Lions, if you will assist me getting rid of Richardson and the Daniels, you can have a major share of the spoils when they're out of the way. Now, the word is that initially the Lions agreed to do this, but when it came later on and there were random incidents of petrol bombs or stuff like that, the senior Lions members were quite not perturbed, but they realised this was bringing a lot of police pressure onto them, and wanted to take a step back, so to speak.
Because they're essentially being used in a way, Richard, aren't they, by McGill for his own benefits?
Yeah, I think initially it was a case of, right, this is a great opportunity to take out the Daniels and also remove Richardson from the scene in Edinburgh. That opens Edinburgh up. But I don't know if they were aware of the impact that this would have. There's been since almost 60 arrests since this. And the Lions' seniority wanted to, as I said, take a step back. But a lot of the kids who they had working for them, they were then being approached individually, as not as a representative of the Lions, but we will pay you £2,000 to set fire to this door. And almost at a sort of independent approach. And this is how it's continued to escalate.
Now, Richardson himself is pretty safe because he's behind bars, but it has come to his doorstep, and I think his girlfriend's shop, or was it a hairdresser's or something she has, it was burnt, and I think members of her family were attacked in their homes as well.
Yeah, it's a beauty salon in Leith, and that was badly damaged in a fire. Her father's business was attacked around the same time, and anyone who was associated with Richardson has been targeted. particularly one of his closest friends, a businessman called David McMillan. He has had his home firebombed, a car firebombed on the driveway of the property, and most recently he was attacked by 4 hooded men wielding machetes and badly injured.
Mm. So do you feel he's bitten off more than he can chew, Richardson?
I think the problem is that with the dynamic now involving Lyons, the Kinahans to a lesser extent, he's in a position where what does he do? Does he back down? Does he just try and disappear when he comes out? Or does he retaliate? Because if he retaliates, it's a show of strength. But if he does retaliate, there's going to be retaliation against him. And like in the school playground, my brother's bigger than your brother. It comes with the very, very real worry that there could be significant retribution meted out to him and his associates. I mean, whilst it has been unpleasant, it's been quite low level in terms of serious and organised crime, but there is always that risk it will get ramped up.
Yeah, it'll escalate. And in the meantime, of course, and we've spoken on the podcast about this before, Ross Monaghan, who he previously was accused of shooting, didn't survive this time. He was shot dead on the Costa at Monaghan's Irish Bar in Fungarola, along with Eddie Lyons Jr. This doesn't really quite fit in, despite the fact that it would be probably easier for us if it did. But your belief and the belief of the Police Scotland is that this is nothing got to do with that ongoing feud back in Scotland. It's something separate, and that probably Eddie Lyons Jr., who is a brother of Stephen Lyons, that he was kind of almost collateral damage in what was a targeted attack on Monaghan.
Yeah, I've always been I've spoken with you about this, Nicola. I'm just up that it's too convenient a story. Whilst the Spanish probably want it because they've obviously blamed the Daniels, it doesn't fit in. It just doesn't fit in. Also, apparently, it was only a few hours beforehand that Eddie Lyons rang his very good friend, Ross Monaghan, on Saturday, May the 31st. Eddie Lyons Jr. was on a golfing trip with his pals. Some of his pals had said, we want to watch the Champions League final. That's on that night. So Eddie said, I'll speak to Ross, see where we can go. That's how Eddie Lyons ended up at Monaghan's bar. And it doesn't fit in. Well, to me, it doesn't fit in that has anything to do with this ongoing gang war. It's much more likely that the main target, the main priority was Ross Monaghan, and Eddie Lyons Jr. just happened to be with him, wrong time, wrong place.
I mean, Monaghan himself, we should probably come back and do something separate on him, but he seems to have made a lot of enemies.
Yeah, he was a very, very feared individual.
Was he a hothead?
Yes, he was. It's always been rumoured that he was part of the gang that stole the initial heroin stash that prompted the war, the outbreak of the war between the Daniels and our Lyons. And he has always been there or thereabouts. So whoever decided to do this clearly is a high-ranking individual.
And where does it leave the Lyons, maybe to finish up on this point, with their sort of, in a simple point of view, like currently, because of those two murders there on the Costa, and there's been no kickback. So in the underworld, that would be seen almost like a weakness or show of weakness or something. Where are they now as regards which are the bigger kind of crew or the more powerful crew? Has this hurt the Lions' sort of reputation, their standing in the underworld? And has it allowed, despite the fact that it's nothing to do with their actual feud, but has it allowed the Daniel organisation to sort of bounce back a bit?
I think that's a very interesting point. I think it's very similar in a way to what we just discussed a few minutes ago with Richardson. What does he do? The Lions know that they have to be seen to be doing something, because if they don't, it gives out completely the wrong impression. You can't have an organised crime group appearing weak, as you said.
And particularly with the loss of a brother.
Yeah. And also loss of one of, if not Stephen Lyon's closest friend, lost one. So he's lost a brother and he's lost a very close friend. What do they do? It might well be that Stephen Lyons knows who's behind it and knows that if they do retaliate, then
he doesn't have the power to retaliate. Yes. It's somebody more powerful than him and what he has left.
So it's an invidious position for him. He knows he should be seen to be doing something, but what can he do? I mean, I don't know if it's strengthened the Daniel position, but it certainly has. They're probably feeling slightly more confident because they will be aware that the Lions need to do something. To say, this is not going to be tolerated. You can't do this to us.
And Richardson, in the meantime, is due for release when?
It must be next year, because he was transferred into Lomos when this war, HMP Lomos, which is a prison, ironically, a quarter of a mile from where the funerals of Monaghan and Lyons took place a couple of weeks ago. He was moved to Lomos due to security reasons when this gang war started. So he's basically been in solitary ever since. So it'll be interesting to see what happens now, and it'll be interesting to see what the picture is when he does come out, because obviously allegiances change. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see what happens next.
And what movie makes next. I mean, he's only 37 years of age. He feels like, from all that has kind of occurred, that he's been around forever, but he's still a young man. And, to be released from prison next year, he's not even 40 yet. So I think we certainly haven't heard the last from Mark Richardson.
No, not at all. These people tend not to go away unless they are incarcerated or taken out. So I think he'll still be around for a good while yet.
Well, really interesting, Richard. Thanks a million for talking to us about that. And we'll be talking again soon, no doubt, about some of the other characters from the Scottish underworld who the listeners, both here and over with yourselves, seem to be very interested in. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicola. Take care now.
I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.